everybody, and welcome to the world's favorite youth baseball podcast, Clearing the Bases, featuring Coach Jimmy Filangieri. I'm David Friedman, and I want to thank you for coming along this ride with us. How we doing this morning, Coach?
Doing good today, Dave. You know, we finally see the sun.
What was it? 2 weeks ago, I think I texted you, hey, aren't we supposed to be done freezing our ass off now? And it lasted another 2 freaking weeks.
Yeah. I mean, yesterday we had a game, and I'm at the field, and I had to start peeling layers off, and I said, "What's that thing up in the sky? And why is the sky blue?"
I can't see. What's going on? Yeah. It's been wild up here in the Northeast. It looks like we've turned the corner, and we should be at least 60s for the week. But it's for older guys like us, it's been miserable.
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, I hate the cold. We all know that. I've said it a million times, and I'm just thankful that yesterday I was like I said, I had to peel layers off. I actually started sweating. It was great.
Yeah. We had a 9:00 game. I had my tights on underneath my pants. I had I had an extra undershirt. I had 2 pairs of socks on because my feet tend to really get cold. And after like the third inning, all of a sudden I ran out to the porta potties. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to change and start stripping them off. So that is by itself in its own little world. That's a beautiful thing. We're actually finally in spring here. How's things going with your season? Where are you standing?
Well, it's been one of those seasons again. It seems like I say this all the time. Every season seems to be this way. We have our ups and downs. Our beginning of the schedule was very tough. We played some of the top teams in the league, and we were holding our own, but, it was ups and downs. And then we went on a run where we were winning, and now we're back in a situation where we're kind of up and down a little bit. But a lot of it has to do with the weather, because we just crammed. Well, we're actually in the process of cramming almost half of our schedule into 1 week, so it's tough.
Yeah, that can certainly take its toll on everything. Your pitching, your catching, and then just the burnout.
Sure.
And also seeing something in a game and not being able to really address it because you don't have practice time once you start playing 3-4 games in a row without a break.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said to you earlier, we just played Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We have today off, and then we go Monday, Tuesday, and then the regular season is over. We get a few days to practice to get ready for the playoffs. And it's been quite the run that we've been going through, but we'll come through it okay. And just as long as we gear up for the playoffs, I kind of like my chances. How about you guys? How are you doing?
This is my third year coaching. This is by far the best record-wise that we've been. I think we are 10-5 right now, or 9-5. We've got a 20-game schedule. We don't have really league and non-league. We don't really separate it out the way that you do, and we don't have any playoff system for our JV. So, but we still have, like I said, 6 or 7 games left that we got to cram into the next week and a half. So it's going to be very busy. Looking forward to it. Our overall kids have been good. We had a little stretch here where we played a weaker team. It was the second time we played them, so we kind of knew what to expect. And we beat up on them, even though I don't want to say we didn't try to, but from a coaching perspective, I mean, we started kids that haven't gotten a lot of starts this year. We threw our youngest pitcher against them to hope to even things out a little bit. But we beat up on them. And we had our next game, because of rainouts, was against another weaker team that we had beat up on earlier in the season. And they actually played us tight for a couple innings. And then ultimately, they just don't have the depth. So we wound up beating up on them. Then we played a team that was good. We had had a good competitive game with them earlier in the season, which we had won, but it was competitive. And they wound up beating us, and I don't think they're a more talented team than us. I think our kids got into a bad headspace of, look at what we're doing to these teams. You play 2 weaker teams in a row, and this is where we talk all the time about the mental side of the game. It's not just the individual and staying positive and having a good effort and attitude thing. It's the general feel of the team of like, oh, we're gonna, we've been crushing teams. We're gonna keep crushing teams. So, oh, if I make an error, it's not a big deal. Or, oh, if I forget to cover my base, it's not a big deal. That type of stuff. And I think we fell into that trap.
Yeah, it happens sometimes. I mean, we had played a game last week. No, it was actually the week before against, one of the weaker teams in the league. And that was my biggest gripe, is that I said, the problem with this is not doing my team any good. This was a bad thing because we're going to fall into bad habits. We're going to play lazy. We're not going to understand that we have to hustle, the whole 9 yards. And luckily it didn't. We came back and we were pretty strong after that. But, there's always that fear.
Yeah. Yeah. So hopefully that was a wake-up call. It was a team again, not a bad team, but certainly a team we should have been able to win the game on. And there was a lot of problems, a lot of physical errors, but a lot of mental errors. And hey, let's face it, a good chunk of your physical errors really are mental errors.
Sure.
Not getting in front of the ball is a physical error, but that is absolutely a mental error. Throwing a ball away a lot of times is a mental thing. Where's your focus? That type of stuff. So, hopefully it was a good wake-up call. We go through the weekend, we reset, and hopefully we come out swinging on Monday the right way.
Absolutely. I mean, that's all you could hope for, right? Hope that we trained them well enough so, like we've talked about before, that old saying from the Navy SEALs is that in times of crisis, we don't rise to the occasion. We sink to the level of our training, and hopefully we hit home with our players with that and make a good run. Yeah.
Yeah, that was an interesting post-game talk that we had with them, where we didn't want to crush their. You don't want to crush their spirits. It's always we talk all the time. There's a lot of fine lines that we walk as coaches. You don't want to crush their spirit and tell them that they're worthless or anything like that. Certainly, but you can't let it go. Just like we say, you got to have a short memory, but you still have to remember some of the basics of what we want you to do. So, I don't want a kid moping around after he does something wrong, but I also don't want to see him, who cares? It was only one run scored. Big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm finding that my post-game talks with the team are getting shorter and shorter and shorter, because really is all I do is I say, okay, guys, how'd we do? They all come back at me. They know what was wrong. Hey, we did this wrong. We didn't do this well, whatever the case is. And I'll believe it or not, I'm the one throwing in the positives. No, wait a minute. We pitched well. We did this well. I like this. I like that. So, and then I'll basically say, okay, so guys, we're aware of where we fell short today. Let's regroup. Come back tomorrow in a better frame of mind, and let's make sure these things don't happen, guys. Okay, get out of here. Everybody have a good night. Right. Those are what my post-game speeches have been lately.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, you got to make sure that they are coming back with the right frame of mind the next time. And, some of the coaches, I'm sure you have seen, I certainly have seen, where they still have kind of that old school mentality of just, we're going through what I want to go through, and I don't care what you kids have to say, and you better show up ready to play tomorrow, otherwise, running laps and whatever other nonsense is going on.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I kind of like my quote unquote new approach, where you guys tell me, because I've said it a million times. They know better probably than we do. There's times where they say things that kind of like went over my head. I didn't even realize it happened. So they know. And let's hope that we train them well enough so that they know what they're supposed to do, and then they come back and, they're ready to go.
Yeah. That's what the plan is, and then we see how it gets executed the next day. So something that's in the news very recently, I wanted to bring up to you. I don't know if you heard about this, but there's a little league in New Jersey that has instituted a new rule that I'm not sure if you heard of this or not, but I think you're going to like it very much. So it's the Deptford Township Little League in New Jersey. Shout out to them. They've instituted a new rule this season to combat the number of arguments between fans and umpires. Spectators who confront umpires during a baseball game must umpire 3 games before they're allowed back to watch. What do you think of that?
Now I'm going to throw you a curveball like you've never seen before, so get ready because I'm probably going to buckle your knees on this.
I know how to sit on them. Go ahead.
So the president of the Deptford Township Little League is a guy named Don Bazzufi. So I saw the article, and we had done our episode about umpires and how they were being abused and all of that stuff. And during that episode, the very end of that episode, you and I discussed that exact thing, where I said, how about we have a registry and bop, 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 and, you know, they have to come back and umpire game. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when I saw the article, I felt compelled to send an email to the president of that league. And I sent him an email, and I said, listen, I just wanted to let you know that I'm behind you 100%. I love what you're doing. Keep me posted on it. I want to know how it works because I think it's a great idea. And we kind of went back and forth a little bit. He sent me a nice email back. But how fantastic is that?
Yeah, that's awesome. I thought you were going to say he got the idea from listening to us, but okay.
No, at least he didn't say that.
But yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. I think it's a great idea. It's something whose time has definitely come, or a long time ago should have been happening, because you go in and you go, all right, I don't know if it's going to work or not. I don't know if I want a bunch of people umpiring that don't know what they're doing, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, you have to do something. It's a philosophy I have, not obviously just with baseball, but with life in general. You can sit and complain all you want, or you can try to do something about it. So if you're going to just complain and throw your hands up in the air, then you're not, you're part of the problem, not part of the solution. So here you go. This is part of the solution. Is this a great idea? Is it a good idea? Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? You got to give it a try before you can make that decision. And my thought is, what's the worst that happens? You get people umpiring games that don't know all the rules. Well, I imagine they still are going to have an umpire there. Maybe they're just the field ump or something like that. Or there's an official from the league that's going to be there that knows the rules, and they can step in and help out. And at the end of the day, we're talking about Little League games. So if a rule is missed, a call is missed, who cares? Right? This isn't, we're not playing for the World Series here. So I think it's a fantastic idea. I would encourage other leagues to try to incorporate something along those lines. That seems to be it seems to me to be the right amount of quote unquote punishment, because one game, maybe they go out there and just goof off once and whatever. But to have to do 3 games, I'm going to assume it's games that their kids aren't in, so they're going to have to sacrifice their time to go and do it the same way that these other umpires do. So I think it's fantastic.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, what better way to show people how difficult it really is to umpire a game than make them umpire.
Right.
Absolutely. You may even want to throw in that after the game, the spectators get to throw stuff at them, maybe give them some beanbags. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Okay. But, let them know
they get their home address. They get to go and, follow them there. And
right.
Yeah, it's, I guess the way I like to look at most of this, what's the negative? Like I said, they miss a call or two. Who cares? They're complaining about clearly, if they were complaining about the umpire, they thought the umpire was missing calls. So you're no worse off there.
Right.
Right. So maybe lesson learned. And hey, maybe every now and then you get somebody who is good at it and they decide to start umpiring games. And now you've increased the skill level of your umpire crew.
No doubt. But, again, I just got to tip my hat to Don for doing this. And I hope, like you said, I just hope that it takes hold and more Little Leagues decide to do it. And I really, really hope that it works.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't see how it can't, because the other side of it is that parent or whoever the spectator may have been is no longer allowed at the games. Okay. Now you've got one less idiot at a game. So that's a positive. Maybe some of the other parents go, well, I don't want that to happen to me. So there's a positive. So, I love it.
And also, maybe you take the idiot and turn him in. You'll be turning him into a non-idiot.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of hope for something like that. I feel like the person that is able and willing to make themselves that big of a jerk at a kid's game, if that's who you are, that's who you are. Right. So maybe, but at least for 3 games, at least for 3 nights, they're not going to be around. So, again, even that's a positive, but
good point.
Yeah. So we're talking a lot about parents and, how they interact with the umpires. We also know we've had plenty of conversations about how they interact with the kids, and that leads us right into today's guest. His name is Travis Dorsch, and he is the founding director of an agency called Families in Sport Lab. And really looking forward to speak with him today. We've got a lot of good topics to get into in terms of how our parents, not just how our parents interact with their kids, but how it affects the whole family dynamic sometimes.
Yeah, if our listeners out there remember, we had Linda Flanagan on, and we were talking about basically the same thing with families and parents and involvement in youth sports. And during that show, she had mentioned about Travis, and I reached out to him and, asked him to come on. And because, again, the Families in Sport Lab is doing studies on this, on how family interacts with the youth sports and all of that type of stuff. And I thought he would be a good guest, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. He is just outside of the work that he's doing, which I think is really cool. He's got a really interesting background. So we're going to talk to him about that a little bit. Don't want to give away too much. That's what we in the business call a tease. So without further ado, let's get into our conversation with Travis Dorsch. So welcome, Travis. Thanks for coming on board with us tonight.
Yeah, really appreciate you guys having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Travis. I think this will be a treat for everyone listening.
Yeah, you bet.
So for anybody that's not familiar with Travis, his background is varied and really pertinent towards a lot of the topics that we talk about here on the show. We've had a couple of professional baseball players. He's our first professional football player to come on board with us. So really excited about that. We'll probably just get into that a little bit. Really looking forward to getting into some of the mental performance side of things that I know that you're real big on.
Yeah, I mean, if it helps, I always wanted to be a professional baseball player. Baseball was definitely my first love, my first passion. My dad was my high school baseball coach. And I did play for a couple years in college at Purdue while I was a football student athlete as well. So that was always the dream. But at some point, I learned that football was going to pay the bills. So I had to hang up the glove and bat.
Yeah, I had seen that you were a 2-sport college athlete, which I think these days is all but gone. Maybe a little bit if somebody runs track and does football or, something like that. But I don't know how many basketball, baseball, or football, baseball players there are anymore.
Yeah, I think in high school it's a pretty common combination to have a guy out there that's the stud on the baseball team and then playing football as well. It's a pretty normal combination. But yeah, I think you get to the college level, especially the D1 college level, it becomes more difficult to do. And man, do I have some stories about long bus trips in the spring and coming back to spring practice the next morning or a winter workout in the indoor facility. It was a challenge to do both. But again, with baseball as a passion, it was something I wanted to do.
That was going to be my first remark, was that it had to be incredibly demanding to be playing 2 Division I college sports. To me, it's unbelievable that somebody could even do that.
Yeah, demanding in different ways too. I mean, there are obvious demands that go along with being a college football player, but I think baseball, just the nature of a short NCAA season, trying to get 60 games into about 90 days. You're always on the road. You're playing 4 or 5 times a week. And again, if you have a long road trip, especially in the spring for northern teams, when you're going down to Tennessee and Alabama and Florida and Mississippi, and then you're taking a 10 or 12-hour bus trip back to northern Indiana, and you got to wake up for a 5 a.m. workout in the weight room. It makes for some long spring days. But again, when it's a passion, you get to it and you get after it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, at that point, and once you're in it, you don't really have a choice. And then you were also an academic All-American, right?
Yeah, somehow I squeaked by and got some homework done amidst all of that. But, I was passionate about my studies too. And I think most student athletes, you get a bad rap, but I think most student athletes really are in it for the right reasons in both domains, in school and in sports. And I was passionate about my work and in the psychology department. And it's led me actually to the nice intersection of where I am today.
Let's get into a little bit about, we haven't mentioned that you are the founding director of the Utah State University Families in Sports Lab. So why don't you give us a little bit of history on the Sports Lab?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I said, coming out of my playing career, I was lost, like a lot of athletes are, and didn't quite know what the next step was going to be. And I went back to pursue a master's degree in sport and exercise psychology, and really fell in love with the topic. It was the perfect intersection of my passions, and that was how young people develop in sport, and also how their families kind of play a huge role in that, and not just their families, but broadly speaking, their communities, their peers, all these people that surround athletes in sport. And so, the formation of the Families in Sport Lab after I got my PhD and got a faculty position at Utah State was, I think, really just the culmination of all that, sort of back brain thinking that had been taking place throughout my academic career, and thinking like, what do I want to do for the next 30 years, 40 years of my life? What do I want to be known for, and who do I want to help? And I'm very passionate about sport as a developmental context, and I'm passionate about the family's role in making sure that sport lives up to its potential.
Yeah, and I think that the main reason why I reached out to you and I wanted to get you on the show is because I'm sure you're very aware of sports parenting is a real big issue now, and it's complex, and there's a lot of things involved in it. And to have somebody like you that's actually studying this and coming up with information and data that can help people, I thought was fantastic.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I mean, parenting is not what it was a generation, and especially 2 generations ago, where kids were largely independent. They could hop on their bike with their bat and glove and get down to the sandlot of the local field and engage in ways that are very different than kids are engaging today, where oftentimes it's a 2-hour, 4-hour, 6-hour car trip or even a plane trip to go to the next big deal, the next big tournament. And of course, that necessitates more parent involvement, right? I mean, parents they're the taxi drivers, the chauffeurs, the launderers, the psychologists, the nutritionists, they do everything for their kids, and they do it from a place of love. No, don't get me wrong. But the way youth sport is designed and delivered today, parents are necessarily more involved. And I think that has a lot of good ramifications, but maybe some bad as well.
So you say that, good and bad. Why don't we get into that a little bit? Let's talk about the good first, and then maybe we'll go into the bad a little bit.
Sure. I mean, both from my research, but also just at a personal level as a sport parent today, I feel like it provides a wonderful context, a wonderful learning context, and an opportunity to spend time with our kids that maybe we wouldn't otherwise. My kids are both aspiring ski racers, and every day after school, I get to spend 45 minutes in the car with them on the way to the mountain. I get to spend time with them on the mountain, and then 45 minutes on the way home talking about their experiences and really being engaged in something that matters a lot to them. So that's 3 or 4 hours that maybe, outside of their participation, I wouldn't get to spend with my kids, wouldn't get to share that time and that experience with them. It provides travel opportunities. It provides learning experiences. Sport is full of successes and failures, and that provides a context for conversations. So many positives. But again, there are negatives as well. And I think it also depends on the kind of context that you're able to find and get your kids into, right? We've all, I think, as parents, shaking our head at like, wow, we got ourselves into it this time. And we try and find a new and better place for our kids, whether that's in sports or in school or in their relationships with peers. So we do the best we can in the moments that we have, but there are definitely positives and definitely negatives.
Yeah. Well, I think what you mentioned, that car ride home, or that car ride to the mountain and then that car ride home, is so very important, where I think a lot of parents lose track of really how important that time is. Instead of, the one phrase that I love is that, when you get in that car after a baseball game and you're on your way home, really the only thing that you have to talk about with your kid is, I just love watching you play. So if more parents understood to use that time, I think, in a positive way, as opposed to talking about all of the stuff that maybe didn't go right that day, I think that, parents should embrace that time that they get to spend with their kids.
Yeah, I love the idea of, I love to watch you play. I love to watch you compete. I love to watch you do things you love to do. I also like a great strategy, kind of a pro tip, is ask a lot of open-ended questions. I think as parents, sometimes we fall in the trap of, did you have fun? Well, that's yes or no. And it's easy for young people to simply give you one word if they hear you at all with their headphones on in the back seat. So a lot of open-ended questions to really let them kind of take ownership of their experience, to let them share with you what matters to them, why they feel sport was important, why they feel they had a good day or a bad day. Let them kind of drive the conversation through some very purposeful prompting.
Yeah, I love that, because we do hear so many of these stories about kids getting burnt out, and you look at, you can just see it in the body language of some of the kids and the looks on their faces, and you got to wonder sometimes why are they coming out here? Are they coming out here out of drive and dedication, or are they coming out here because they think that's what they're supposed to be doing? And that gets tough as a coach. We're not going to tell parents how to parent, but we have to walk a fine line of trying to watch out for our players at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point you bring up. And one of the things I try and do often, probably, not every day, because that would get tiresome for my kids, but one of the things I try and do quite often is actually ask them. I pick them up from school. We've got the skis on the car, the gears in the back. We're ready to go. The assumption is, okay, we're going skiing. But I try and ask the kids, hey, do you want to go train today? Do you want to go to the mountain today? And because then once they say yes, now they've owned the experience that day. Whether it goes good, whether it goes bad, they've owned it. And to this day, there's only been one or maybe two times where they've said no. And then as a parent, you got to own that and be like, all right, we're going home, or we're going to do something else, because that keeps that love, keeps the fire burning, and allows them, again, to have ownership of the experience rather than just feel like they're being dragged along to fulfill mom or dad's goals.
I love that.
Right. And what happens when one says they want to and one says they don't?
I haven't had that one yet. That's a great point, especially with two kids playing the same sport. It's one of the interesting things actually about being on something like a ski team where a 6 and an 8-year-old are going to play together. I know a lot of families, one of the primary struggles is I've got 2 or 3 kids, 2 or 3 age groups, 2 or 3 teams in 2 or 3 cities, and we've only got 2 parents. So how do we manage all of this? So, my family's fortunate in that regard for most of the year, but again, just kind of keeping it about the kid, I think is the take home.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've always said. We have 2 kids, and once they were both in that age where they could participate in things, I was, I don't know how anybody with 3 kids does this, because we feel outnumbered when it's 2 to 2. So if you got 3 kids or 4 kids, I was just always so impressed that people were able to manage that around, and just impressed and kind of worried about like how crazy that has to be.
No, for sure. I mean, we joke about, it's much easier to play man-to-man defense than zone. We're able to divide and conquer when we need to. But, especially living out here in Utah, you do see bigger families, and gosh, they manage it so well. Carpools are definitely a thing. But, I also, from the parent perspective, I would hate to miss all those cool opportunities and seeing my kids do something they love. So, it's something that you got to balance when you have multiple kids doing multiple things in multiple places.
So the next thing that I wanted to jump into is I wanted to get your opinion on, because I don't remember where I got this from, but the question was asked, why are sports no longer fun for our youth? What's your opinion on that?
I think that's a broad generalization. I think it might be fairer to say that for a lot of kids are having less fun maybe in sports than they used to. But sports aren't neutral, right? Sports aren't good. They're not bad. They're not fun. They're not boring. It's all about the context that the adults create. You guys as coaches have likely been at the front of teams that have had great seasons and a lot of fun, and others where it's a little more stagnant, more stale, and maybe you're really pulling teeth to get the kids out there and enjoying themselves. And that has to do with culture and context. And so I think as the adults in the room, in your case as the adults on the field, gym, court, ski mountain, whatever, you gotta keep it child-centered, right? You gotta make sure that there is motivation to compete, right? Competition, it's not only fun, right? And competition and fun aren't mutually exclusive. So you got to make sure that there's effort to compete, that there's effort to make things fun and enjoyable and new and novel and exciting, that they're learning life lessons, that, all of these transferable skills that we always talk about are being learned in the context of sport. So, I think, look, when it's not being fun, we can't look at the kids. We got to look at us as adults, as the co-creators of the sport experience, and say, hey, what are we doing that we could actually be doing better?
And that's where I was kind of going with that, was that, it's not the kids, because the kids, given the right environment, are going to have fun if it's made to be that way. But I think a lot of times there's too much pressure put on these players by their parents, instead of just going out and having that fun and enjoying yourself, and whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I mean, look, I started the conversation by saying I view sport as a developmental context, a place for learning. And in that way, it's very much like an academic setting, right? A school can be bad, or a school can be good. A school can be fun, or a school can be boring. You look at, the college environment, right? You send a kid to a place like Harvard or Yale, and maybe there's more pressure, and maybe it's not as much fun, but there's an end game in mind, versus you send them to a party school and they're going to have a lot of fun, but maybe not learn as much. So balancing that in sport is just as important as it is to balance it in an academic setting or in another achievement domain like music or art or anything else.
Jimmy and I talk on this show all the time about, especially with the youngest kids, about making sure we're making it fun. And we definitely tend to, not we as in us, but in general, we see that obviously that starts to fade. That aspect of it starts to fade as they get a little bit older, and right in the range of where we are, again, high school age, because once we get into, JV, it's a little bit less, because especially like in our league, we don't have a league championship. We're not playing for sectionals or states. We're JV, but the varsity is. So they are playing during the season, and they're trying to get their seeding up for the, for the postseason and all that stuff. So balancing that out as the kids get older and older gets so much more difficult. We do what we can to check in with our kids and whatnot, but we do see on other teams where that's not really happening.
Yeah, here's something that's interesting. It might seem like a semantic exercise to make a distinction between fun and enjoyment. But I like to use the term enjoyment rather than fun, because to me, fun is like, it's visceral, it's fleeting. You can be having fun playing a card game, and then somebody does something and you're not having fun anymore instantaneously. Whereas enjoyment is more sort of you view a long-term outcome as important, so you appreciate the process that you're in. Look, if I'm going to do a 5 a.m. workout, if I'm jumping on the treadmill in the middle of the winter, getting ready for a marathon, I'm enjoying the heck out of that process, even though in the moment it's not fun. I'm enjoying becoming a better athlete. And I think when we talk about, even at the youngest levels, and really especially at the level you're talking about here in junior high, high school, even on into college, that term enjoyment becomes really important, because you have to enjoy the process of hard work, enjoy the process and outcomes of competition, good and bad. And I think that's not always fun. It's not always fun being an elite athlete or aspiring to be an elite athlete, but you can enjoy that process. So for me, again, professors like to play semantic games all the time, but for me, that distinction is really important when we talk about it, because sport can't only be about fun. Absolutely, from the earliest little leaguer to the retiring major leaguer, it has to be enjoyable. Otherwise, when that motivation is gone, there's nothing really to drive you.
I love that. I think I'm going to steal that.
That's a great way to look at it. I never thought of it in those terms, because you think about what does it mean to be fun? It could be just running around, whatever, as opposed to enjoying it, because maybe you lose 10-1. Okay, you're definitely not having fun, but it doesn't mean that you didn't enjoy certain parts of that game that went on. But you certainly wouldn't look back and say, oh yeah, that was fun. I certainly loved getting my butt kicked all for the last 2 hours.
Right, but you've been around probably some really great players who went on to become elite in later years, and those players, after that 10-1 loss, they're the ones that you find in the batting cage, because they enjoy the process of bouncing back, because they enjoy the grind that it takes to get better. So again, it's that idea of like enjoying the full process, not just having fun in a moment.
So let's move on to my next thing. I think I got this from Youth Sport Parent Education.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into a little bit about sampling, specialization, and investment. When I was reading up on that, I thought it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, this work comes from Jean Coté at Queen's University in Canada and his collection of students and colleagues over the past couple of decades. The initial work began in 1999, and they've been publishing on this for, as I said, a couple decades now. And really what they tried to do initially was create an understanding for the family's involvement in organized youth sport and giving parents kind of a rubric for the developmental trajectory that their kids are going to go through, right? And that begins with what he and his colleagues called this sampling phase, where my kid's 4, 5, 6 years old. We're going to get them in that 6-week baseball program. Then they're going to switch to soccer. Then they're going to do flag football, then basketball, then wrestling. They're going to kind of try it all. And seasons are short. There are breaks in between. You're maybe practicing one day a week and having a little game one day a week. That's kind of the sampling stage. And then as kids move into late childhood, early adolescence, kind of that junior high age, 11, 12, 13, they're going to transition then more into a specialization stage where they might decide, either because they're good at something or because they love it, probably both, that they're going to specialize in one or two sports. And you tend to see this when kids are 11 or 12. They're going to kind of have their favorite sport they're really focused on, and then maybe a second sport, and they're going to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff and kind of get rid of all those other things that they used to do when they were kids because they want to put their eggs in this or these baskets. And that typically lasts until middle, late adolescence. And for those that are fortunate enough to continue participating, in high school, as kids get into that 15, 16, 17-year-old age range, kind of varsity level type athletes, we then see that investment stage where now I'm a baseball player. I'm spending time, money, effort, energy in the off season. It becomes a 9 or a 10 or an 11-month endeavor rather than just, a few weeks here, a few weeks there. And I'm really invested now with all my soul and all my heart and all my athleticism into this one pathway or trajectory. So that was kind of the early version of their model of sport participation. More recently, they've published on a sort of addended version of that, whereby they acknowledge that there are different ages and stages where people can find themselves on these pathways, right? We all know that, an Olympic gymnast is going to be on that specialization and investment pathway much sooner. Maybe when they're 6 or 8 years old, even, where they're focused on that, because that's only 2 Olympic cycles away from when they're 16 and 17 and competing potentially, versus a marathon runner who might not even find distance running until they're in their mid-20s. And they're going to become elite in their 30s and maybe even into their early 40s. So there's variation, based on sport, based on body type, based on accessibility and opportunity. So Cote and his colleagues have come back now and said, people really have a couple of different reasons for getting in sport. One might be to pursue sport as a lifelong participant, a recreational participant, whereas other people are getting in it for that elite pathway. And there are different trajectories to find yourselves on those recreational or elite pathways. So without getting kind of too far into the weeds, the take home, I think, for parents is that we need to let young people grow into their bodies and find out what their passions are. And when they can do those two things, then it's okay to specialize and to invest. But what we see now, come on, guys, you've seen this, especially in baseball, travel leagues and things. The parents of these 8-year-olds that are saying, hey, my kid's ranked 100th in the country among 8-year-old pitchers.
Yeah.
That's crazy, right? Because the kid hasn't gone through puberty yet. The kid doesn't even know if he likes baseball yet, hasn't had an opportunity to be trained at a high level yet. So, really letting the kid grow into their body, find their passions, and then allowing them, to kind of put all the eggs in that basket.
Yeah, we actually we had talked about it a couple of shows ago, I think, where we actually saw one of our listeners, I think, had sent something to us. They had seen an ad for a 7U tournament with a cash prize for the winner. And Jimmy just about fell off his chair when I showed that to him. That type of thing is like how could that ever ultimately wind up being a good thing? Like I see so many negatives for that type of attitude, because now you talk about, I know you talked about this in your TEDx talk, and I thought it was great with the investment from the commodification of the parents. And that was the first thing that came to mind is like, all right, I bought my 7-year-old a $200 bat and $180 glove, and I've got him, the Mike Trout cleats are on them and all this stuff. Hey, I got a chance to get $80 back or $100 back if we win this tournament. And I'm like, yeah, I could just see this just really, really tanking the sport as a whole if that something like that catches on, because these kids are going to have so much extra pressure on them.
Yeah, it just strips away the intrinsic motivation for them to even want to be out there for themselves, right? Because then you're looking over your shoulder at mom and dad. You've seen this. I'm positive you've seen this as coaches. Every time a kid makes a mistake or does something good, and they immediately look up to the stands to see mom or dad's reaction. It happens on basketball courts, baseball diamonds, everywhere. And it's hard. It's hard to see that as, I'm a sport parent. And sometimes my kids will do that. And it kind of checks you for a minute, because you're like, hey, they need to be doing this for them. And I try and redirect and say, hey, focus on you, talk to your coach, you guys figure it out. Rather than having them look to us as parents all the time. But, the number of times that I've had a parent of an 8-year-old basketball player, let's say I'll use this as a generic example, tell me my kid's the best, in our town or our state, or he's ranked, 199th in the country. He's got a shot at playing in the NBA. And I look over at mom and dad, and mom's 5'4" and dad's 5'9". I'm like, your kid's not playing in the NBA, because there are some things that when the sperm meets the egg, like it's,
right.
There's a certain level of ceiling of potentiality, and you got to let your kids find that as they get to and through puberty. And then not only do they have to have the potential, but you guys know as coaches, they also have to have a passionate love for it on top of that potential. Otherwise, it's all gone. So I think the main thing that parents need to avoid doing is killing that passion, because if that's gone, it doesn't matter how talented they are.
Yeah, I kick myself often for not, spying, trying to grab somebody from the volleyball team or basketball team when I was in college. My genetics were weak enough, and then I, sharing them with my wife, who was not a sports person. That was just a bad road to go down for my kids.
Right. Well, who was it? It was wasn't it Springer that said, if he knew that his wife didn't have or had little athleticism or something like that, he would have never married her or something like that.
Yeah, and he's starting at a much higher point than I am, that's for sure. But we do see that. It's funny. I don't think I've ever actually encountered live a parent that had that kind of attitude about their very young child in terms of saying it, but I certainly have encountered it from what I see in their actions and their reactions to the way things are going on the field. So, yeah, definitely agree with you on that one. Again, you talk about all this undue pressure on these kids, and that's where you see the kid that's, baseball wise at 12, he's the biggest kid on the field, and he's hitting home run after home run because it's a 200-foot fence. Mm-hmm. And maybe he was the biggest kid because he hit puberty a little early, and the next year or 2 years later, other kids catch up to him, and all of a sudden he's medium-sized, and those home run balls, the center fielder's coming in and making a play on him and stuff like that.
200-foot flares, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, Dave, you had brought it up about Travis when you had talked about the return on investment. Okay, that parents, I guess, expect. So let's talk about that a little bit, because I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, return on investment's a really interesting concept, because I think parents don't want to be in this position, but because of what youth sport is today, parents are being forced to spend more. I mean, show me an opportunity where your kid who shows any elite potential can find an opportunity to play for, less than $1,000 or $1,500 or $10,000 in some cases a season. They just don't exist. And I think when you look at what that does, we have some research that suggests that the more that parents spend, the downstream effects of that can be really problematic, in the sense that it creates this sense of parent pressure on the part of the child. Look, kids are smart, they're savvy, they know mom and dad are putting down a lot of money. They might not know how much, but they know mom and dad are putting resources into this opportunity for me. And if I don't do well, now I feel like I'm letting down the family and mom and dad and myself. And because of that feeling of pressure, kids actually then subsequently feel less motivated to continue participating, and they enjoy sport less. And there's just all these kind of negative repercussions from all of that spending. And I think one of the erroneous take homes that people have gleaned from this research is that we shouldn't spend money. That's absolutely not what I'm saying as the one who conducted the research. It's how do we act as a result of spending the money? What kind of conversations are we having with our kids as a result of spending the money? Are we in the car after they don't play or play poorly and saying, man, I spent all this money and you're not playing, you're not getting any time, your coach isn't putting you in, or man, you really, all the private lessons we got you, you're not putting any of that onto the field. So it's these types of conversations. Maybe they just overhear mom and dad talking in the kitchen about, man, we're wasting all this money. So it's these sort of subtle cues that kids pick up on that then lead them down that road of, feeling parent pressure, not enjoying sport, and not wanting to continue playing. So spending can be good, spending can be bad. It's all about how you treat that as a family. Do you expect that return? Do you expect the college scholarship, the starting position, the win and loss record, all of that?
Well,
right. And I mean, you talked about right in the beginning, I mean, in some, not necessarily $10,000 a season, but you really don't have a choice but to spend some level, the entry level. And again, my kids are a little older, so we haven't been in the travel ball scene for a number of years. I can only imagine. I mean, Jimmy and I talk about it because up until this year, he's been coaching travel. I haven't coached travel since my kids got out of it 4 or 5 years ago. But the way just the basic entry fee without any extra special private lessons or anything else has just grown. So unfortunately, the starting point seems to be so horribly high right now on that I think that's where we're going to see even more and more of that pressure of what am I getting? What is my return on investment here? And if it's just enjoyment, unfortunately, that's probably not good enough for the majority of parents.
Yeah, unless you've got, all kinds of money that you're not afraid to part ways with.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Most parents aren't in it for the enjoyment. Now, look, we all value the life lessons. We all want our kids to have fun and enjoy the experience. But if we're putting $5,000 or $10,000 towards something, you want the return on the investment as well. Now, the key though is how do you communicate that? How do you represent the values that your family has to the kids? How do you allow them to imbue the values that are becoming important to them in sport? Values like fair play and competition and learning and respecting authority figures and building strong peer relationships, all those things that we say we value, sure, but at the end of the day, we want to see you getting better in those areas.
Well, I think that part of that comes from, and we've talked about this before, that I feel that the worst evaluator of a player's talent or ability is a parent. And what happens is, and I believe that a lot of this has to do with the demise of Little League baseball, is because everybody wants to get to that next biggest thing, so they're willing to spend any money to get their kid in a place that they deem to be elite, we'll say. And I think that's where a lot of the problem comes in too, because people want to spend all this money because they think that that's going to get them, like you said, maybe that college scholarship, or it's going to get them to be able to play on that varsity team, not realizing that all of the things we spoke about, the kid's ability, the kid's drive, and all of these things are really what'll do it. You could put him anywhere and let him play. If the kid has the drive and the ability, he's going to succeed.
Yeah, I think it comes back to this concept we talk a lot about in human development research of sort of, vicarious expectations, vicarious learning, vicarious experiences. And of course, the word vicarious means that we're living through someone else. And I think oftentimes parents are so wrapped up, and their value of themselves as a parent is so wrapped up in, did my kid strike out, or did my kid hit a home run? Is my kid the winning pitcher or the losing pitcher? I mean, you look at your next set of games, how the parents respond when their kids succeed and fail in the field. And of course, those two words themselves, success and failure, are, they're defined subjectively by every person. But you look at the emotions and the body language of the parents, and I'm telling you that our experiences as parents are vicariously, experienced through our kids, and that's hard not to have those emotions. Now, some are better than others at bringing it together, being the adult in the room, kind of putting a wall up a little bit around those emotions. it's okay for it to hurt, but it's not okay for it to affect the relationship with your kids, right? They need to see you as supporting them, as loving to watch them play, as you said earlier, no matter what the result.
So one of the other things that I wanted to get into, which I think that you probably give some good insight on, is what do you feel the coach's role in youth sports is?
That's an awesome question. My research in my career.
Oh, there's one for you, Jimmy.
I get them once in a while.
My research hasn't really looked at coaches in this, what we know to be a triadic relationship with athletes and parents. One thing I will say is I've seen far too many coaches that try and exclude parents, that try and keep them outside the fences, so to speak. And that's really not possible. As we mentioned, for all the reasons early in the show, we met, all the roles that parents have to fulfill, the money that they're putting down, they feel like they have a vested interest, like they should have a say. Now, while I don't think parents necessarily need to have a say, I think savvy coaches are able to bring them into the fold and utilize their knowledge, their experience, their passion. Give them chores, give them duties, let them help, let them be involved, let them see what their kids are doing, because ultimately, it's difficult not to see your kids developing. And I think, one of the things we've done really successfully to share an anecdote from the ski team here is we let our parents kind of roam while the kids are training on the weekends, and they'll ski by every once in a while. We let the parents ski down the course because it gives them a sense of what their kids are doing. And then towards the end of the season, we actually have a parent training day where the kids become the coaches. And the parents are the athletes, and they're out there. The kids are coaching them, they're teaching them, they're bringing them into the fold to kind of show them what the kids do. And I think that's provided a lot of empathy on the part of the parents in terms of, wow, my kids are super impressive. And and the coaches have trained our kids to be super impressive. They know what they're doing. And I've valued that experience. It would be akin to maybe bringing the parents out for a batting practice or a scrimmage or something in baseball, and allowing them to see what a 70-mile-an-hour BP fastball looks like off the front of the mound, to let them see how far you really have to hit it to get it over the fence, to stand at shortstop and see what a ball coming at you, a 3-hopper at 90 miles an hour coming at you looks like. So I think bringing parents into the fold can be really valuable, and if done well by a savvy coach, can build allies across those parents, because now they know how hard you're working as a coach for their kids. They know how hard the kids are working to be the best that they can be, and they're able to kind of just take a step back and be like, wow, this is sort of beyond my level, and I'm happy to now just be a fan and support the coaches and the kids in their mission.
Now that's interesting.
That's an interesting concept, and I think I like it. I think I like it a lot, because one of the things that we run into again as kids get a little bit older, and we don't have a lot of problems with this, but it seems like one parent a year maybe we get at the team that I coach. I'm the assistant coach, but we're kind of 1 and 1A. We work really, really well and very closely together. Is the whole thing of like, we'll get an email from a dad, usually a dad, could be a mom or dad. We'll get an email from a parent that says something like, hey, how come my kid's not getting the opportunity to play? He's riding the pine, he's whatever. And I mean, our standard answer, this is the 3rd year that we've been doing it together, and our standard answer is just, he has the same opportunity everybody else has in practice. And based on what he shows us there, determined. Now everybody almost always gets in every game with us. It may be one at bat at the end or something like that. Like the head coach, he's the most fair coach I've ever seen in terms of, especially at the high school level, that goes. So, when we get that type of complaint, it's interesting because this is probably the first time that their kid's playing and they haven't been at every practice. Like when the kid's younger, you're not, most of the time they weren't dropping the kids off, at least in our area, again, different areas of the country and different situations, it might be different, but where, the parents aren't able. I know it was a big shock to me to not be able to watch my kids practice when they got up into high school. So you really don't know what's going on there. So that's the other thing, that maybe it's an opportunity for the parent to kind of take a look and see if their kid can't explain to them the things that they're supposed to do that could be an eye opener as well, that, maybe he's not putting his forth as much effort as he tells me he's putting forth, or, that type of thing.
Yeah, this is a yes and situation, because I love what you just said, but I would add one more thing that I think would be a great strategy for coaches to utilize. And my blanket response for a parent who called me, if I were the coach, would be, hey, have your kid come and talk to me. Because that teaches them some assertiveness and responsibility for the kid, right? You want that athlete to learn that life skill, because mom and dad aren't going to call your boss. They're not going to call your spouse when you're having problems at work or at home. So the kid being able to step up and speak for themselves is really important. But I think also you'll learn a lot as a coach, because if the kid comes to you and is like, hey, I feel like I deserve to be playing. What more can I do? Then you have an honest conversation with the kid. But I think more often than not, the kid would kind of shy away and be like, no, mom and dad are just, they don't know. You're doing right by me, coach. Keep it up. Right? They would kind of shy away from that confrontation, because they are at practice every day, and kids are good at social comparison. They know exactly where they fit in any team. So, put the onus on the kids and have them come talk to you, have them sort of man up, so to speak, and do that, because it's a valuable skill. And I think you as a coach will learn a lot about where they truly feel like they stand as well.
Yeah, we've talked about it on here and sort of debated it of, where is that line in terms of where is that age where it's still, is it too much to ask for the kid to be able to man up, as you say, and I'm sure we use that term at the time, because we're in that kind of Mason-Dixon line of that, where some of our kids might be as young as 13, up to 15 years old, and that's the prime age for that. So yeah, that's generally the attitude of most coaches here, is that some coaches just flat out won't speak to the parents about it. It's just have your kid come and see me, and that's where I fall a little softer on that. Of I don't have a problem if they come together, or if the parent starts it, we are always going to speak to the kid also. Yeah. But I personally don't have a problem engaging the parent on that, but I'm going to throw questions out to them that they're not going to be able to answer.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I'm a huge proponent of coach-parent communication. Don't get me wrong. I do think that there needs to be sort of a competitive window where before or after a game, or if something happens at practice before or after a practice, there needs to be a cooling off period, right? You can't confront, if you're a parent, you can't confront a coach 5 minutes after the game. Go have a conversation and say, hey, I saw some things today. I would love to chat with you about it tomorrow, or, before the next road trip or something. Let everybody cool off and then have a mature conversation. But far too many times have I seen somebody just blow up with emotion, and then it's tough for the coach not to, puff their chest out and get defensive as well. And then the kid's caught in the middle of this, which we're all supposed to be here for the kid. And now you got two adults that are making fools out of themselves over something that shouldn't have been an issue. So I like to have that kind of buffer rule, whether it's 24 hours or the next day or whatever it might be, before you would engage in that conversation.
That's interesting, because I had just recently, within the last week, I had two things. And like Dave said, we've spoke about this many times before, where I'm a proponent on my high school team that, no, I don't really want to. I want to do like what you said. I want the players to come to me. We'll work it out, and that's it. It's time to become a man. As coaches, we're there to help you get there, to become young men. So let's start now. But what's interesting is I had two parents come to me. We had an incident on a team where two of my players wound up getting suspended. And one of the parents came up to me, and she said she wanted to know what was going on, and I said, okay, sit down. And my approach is always to be brutally honest, and that's what I said to her. I said, I'm going to be brutally honest. Are you ready to hear this? And she said yes, and we went through the whole thing, and by the end she was fine with it, because there was no way of arguing it. It was the truth. This is what happened, and this is why it's going on. Then the other kid's dad, I didn't talk to until a couple of days later. And the conversation went on for about a half hour, 45 minutes. It was a long conversation. The next day, I said to the player, I said, how's your dad's ear feel? I said, did I talk his ear off? I said, I must have killed him. So he looked at me and he said, Coach, he said, my dad got in the car and he said, Coach taught me a lot tonight. He said he taught me a lot about how this works. And that made me feel so good, because I felt that, here was somebody who was maybe looking at it, a little sideways and thinking that what I was doing was wrong. But when I was able to explain the reasons why I did it, now Dad understood. So maybe that's not such a bad thing to have that communication with the parent, whereas before I believed that there should be really none.
Yeah, I was right again.
When coaches, mature coaches who feel good about who they are as a coach, when they're able to bring parents into the fold and utilize them as allies, both allies at home, because you know that they're going to have the kids' ear at home. So when you can create allies that are going to be on your team at home, on road trips, man, it goes so much more smoothly. And there's going to be some parents you can never convert. That's true on every team. But if you build walls as a first step, then it's really hard to ever bring people in. And then you just better hope you're winning and things are going well. I encourage coaches in every sport all the time to bring parents in, to allow them to see through the plexiglass and see what's happening, to see your mad scientist methodology, to know what your philosophy is. I think all of that is super important, because you can turn potential enemies into allies real quickly at the beginning of the season, and then they're going to want to help you.
Do you have time for 2 more questions?
Do it.
Okay. The first one is, what does appropriate parent involvement look like?
That's such a good question. And if I had a magic bullet, I wouldn't be a professor anymore. I'd be on a beach somewhere. But I think the hard part of answering this is, it's an N of 1 for every family, and really every kid within every family. You've probably dealt with on your teams, having multiple kids from the same set of parents, and you're like, how did the same parents raise these 2 kids? They're completely different. So where I'm going with this is, every athlete has a relationship with multiple people, with you as their coach, with 1 or 2 parents. Maybe even if there's step parents involved, it could be multiple parents, could be grandparents involved. They have sibling relationships, peer relationships. All of that matters. All of that is the context that creates their need for a certain type of parent involvement. I always wanted my parents there. I had teammates who hated their parents being there. They avoided them at all costs. I wanted my parents to be brutally honest about what they thought about my performance. I had teammates who never wanted their parents to talk to them about anything. So, those are the 2 ends of the spectrum, and there's everything in between, of course. So that becomes difficult for a coach, because as you're trying to guide and be part of, at the same time, that parent-athlete relationship, you need to know that it's going to be different for every single one of your athletes on the team. And the best way, I think, to manage that is to ensure that there's open and frequent communication. Encouraging your athletes to talk to their parents about what you're talking to them about at practice. Encouraging your athletes to talk to their parents about their goals, about their own perceived ability, about what they want to get out of the season. If they're in it for friendships, a little bit of playing time here and there, and to be on the journey with other people, they need to communicate that with their parents, so their parents can be happy for them when they're achieving those things. If the kid wants to go get a college scholarship, then their parents need to be on board with helping them on that journey as well. And those are very different journeys. So parent-child communication, regular, intimate, involved, is good, but it needs to be child-directed. It can't be the parent's goals that the child is adopting. It needs to be the child's goals that the parent is adopting.
I love that answer.
What do you think the player is looking for from their parents in general? I mean, I know obviously it could be wildly different if dad's the coach versus, just being sitting in the stands. That's a very wide open question, but I guess just kind of boil it down to percentage wise. In general, what do you think the kid is looking for?
Yeah, I mean, it changes over the course of development is the short answer. Early on, when kids are young children, they look to their parents as sources of competence information, right? They trust and love mom and dad and believe that they know everything. You guys have been through this with your own children now, and you know that then as kids move into adolescence, they begin looking more towards their peers, and they begin to reference themselves in their broader world, and they don't care so much what mom and dad think about their effort, ability, and behaviors. And then as kids move through that into late adolescence and early adulthood, they begin to kind of self-reference. They compare themselves to who they were yesterday. Am I getting better? They look to trusted mentors like coaches and teachers and older peers to kind of help guide them. And so what that boils down to is that parents need to know that they have a changing role over the course of their kids' development. And what that means is that support will also look different, right? So in the beginning, it's I'm there, I'm doing everything, I'm all in, I'm here for you. I'm kind of pulling the rope a little bit to steal a metaphor. And then as the kid grows and develops and begins to take the reins of their own journey, now the parent needs to move around behind and be a source of tangible and emotional financial support. So I'm not pulling the rope anymore. My child is fully directing their own journey now, but I am here to support them when they have a bad day, when they have a struggle, when they need advice, when the coach is on them, when they get cut, right? All of these moments where they need a shoulder or an ear, parents serve in that role. And then in that third stage, when the child is now fully invested and they're a high school varsity athlete, they're a college athlete, they're a professional athlete or Olympian, now the parent just gets to sit in the stands and enjoy the fruits of the journey and just smile and be there and take pictures and give them hugs when the competition is over. So the role changes, and therefore the support that's needed also changes. But again, I'll go back and say that I think there needs to be constant communication about what the child wants through the parent.
Yeah, and to make sure you're having that conversation, you say constant conversation, again, as they get older and they're more, it'll be easier for them to express, should be easier for them to express themselves as opposed to just going along because they know dad played baseball, so I'm going to play baseball, that type of thing.
100%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was there anything else specific that you want to get into here, or I mean, you've been really just bouncing off us, so I just want to make sure that.
Honestly, I think we've covered a lot of ground. It sounds like you do have more questions. Let's do it again in a year or two. That would be fun. I think it would be fun to come back and kind of revisit some of the things you've talked about or that I've talked about and see if they're working, right? I can sit out here and tell people what to do, but it's also nice to see those things work on the ground in an everyday youth sport environment. So would love the opportunity to chat with you guys again down the road.
That would be awesome. That really would be awesome. I think there's a lot of other directions that we can get into here. So, Travis, I want to thank you so much for coming on board with us here tonight. This has been fantastic. Really, I know our listeners are going to get a lot out of this because I know I did. I know Jimmy did. How can our listeners follow you? What's the best way? Are you on the socials, websites?
Yeah, you can find our lab website at Utah State University. We're just the Families in Sport Lab. We're also on Twitter. We're on academic Twitter. Professional handle is at Families in Sport, and my personal handle is at Big Sky Boiler, which pays homage to my Montana roots and my Purdue opportunities. So, yeah, really enjoyed being with you guys today. David and Jimmy, you guys have a great thing going on here, and I look forward to joining you next time.
Travis, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. Like Dave said, I'm just going to echo, the information that you gave out is priceless, and, I can't see how our listeners will not benefit from this interview. This was great.
Yeah, I love it when parents reach out. So if these provide you any success stories or any drastic failures, feel free to reach out, and love chatting with the boots on the ground, so to speak. I mean, the parents, I tell you what, being a sport parent is not easy. And I really love the effort 99.9% of sport parents are putting in, and they're doing it for the right reasons. So it's fun to watch and always great to help inform them in small ways.
All right, well, great. Well, again, thank you so much for spending the time with us. And hopefully we will speak again soon in a long week. All right.
Hey, good luck with the rest of your season. Enjoy.
Thanks, Travis. We appreciate it.
You too. Well, there you have it. That's Travis Dorsch from the Families in Sport Lab. What'd you think, Coach?
I loved it. Absolutely loved it. There's so much stuff that he brought out from how we should be interacting with, how I shouldn't say we, but I should say how parents are interacting with coaches, and players are interacting with their parents, and parents are, there was just an incredible amount of information there, and I think that it's something that our listeners should really be able to get a lot out of, how parents can make the whole youth sports experience a better place and a more enjoyable endeavor.
Yeah, makes, I imagine you're in the same boat, but it makes me think back to how I was with my kids in the car after the game in the car. And I'm sure, just because it's my nature, I'm sure I did more of the talking than they did, as opposed to asking them how did they think it went or what have you. And I think that's really important. And if you can build that type of trust with your players in general, whether they're your kids or not, I mean, this reflecting back onto the coaching side of it, this is, again, what we've had multiple guests that have talked about, is building up that trust level with your players. I think that can only make everything better. And maybe, worst case scenario, you find out the kid's not really enjoying it and this isn't the thing for them. But I think the upside of getting to maybe the root of what some of their stress causes might be could go for miles and miles of helpfulness.
Yeah, the part of the interview that hit home with me was when he said, when you're talking to your player, to ask a lot of open-ended questions. I thought that was so important because, again, to your point, we probably did most of the talking, but by using that open-ended question, you're going to start getting your player to give you what's going on inside their head. And I really thought that was very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Doing those, because if you asked any parent, I'm sure that they're going to say that they check in with their kids and they're sure that they make sure that their kids are having fun, enjoying it and whatnot, which on a side note, I really liked his differentiating between those two terms, the enjoyment of it versus just having fun. But yeah, I'm sure very few parents are sitting there going, no, I don't care what my kids, whether they're enjoying it or not. No, I'm sure most of them think that they are. They think that they're asking good questions like, hey, did you have fun today? Yeah. Okay, great. And then moving on, as opposed to, hey, what did you like about today?
Right.
And just something as simple as that. And it's funny because, again, me being in sales for many years, this is a tactic. This is like, it's ingrained in me. I do it all day long, whether I'm actually talking to a client or I'm talking with one of the people that I'm training or whatnot. I do that all the time, but I don't know that I thought of it in this context.
Yeah. Yeah, I really, to be able to differentiate between fun and enjoyment, especially when he talked about you need to enjoy the process, okay? You don't have to like it. It doesn't have to be fun, but you have to enjoy the process. And let's face it, if you got to go every other day to the gym and spend an hour, 2 hours, lifting weights or something to get yourself in better physical condition, it may not be fun, but you're enjoying what it's going to do for you to make you a better player. I thought that was great the way he explained that.
Yeah, and then the whole the parent training day where the kids coach the parents at the end of the season. I think that's a cool way to wrap some things up as well. So I think he's got a lot to offer. I would love to get him back again because, to use one of your sayings, only scratch the surface with this guy. So I can't wait to get him back and talk to him again and see what new things he's come up with.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end, he did say that he's open to coming back, which I love. And you know what, Dave? It seems, and I guess this is a credit to the way we do this show. Almost every guest always say that they want to come back, which is a great thing. I mean, we can get people back like Travis and tell him, look, this is what we seen has been happening, and let's visit this. And maybe not maybe, but I know he'll have more information to put out there for people so that they can make it more, his word, enjoyable.
And that's what it should all be about. So you're going to have to change you've been hammering down to make sure it's fun, make sure it's fun, make sure it's fun for so many years. You're going to have to make a little adjustment there. And maybe we get a little, well, I was going to say a little copyright infringement, but as our friend Steve Springer likes to say, I give you credit once and then it's mine.
Well, but again, going back to what you just said, perfect, because as a coach, I have never, ever taken the path that I know everything. So when you get something like that, okay, I feel that Travis just made me 1% better.
All right. So he gave you his contact information. If you want to find out more about what he's working on, you want to get involved in that aspect of it, read up on it more, and just look him up online. On Twitter, he's at Families in Sport. I would definitely recommend him as a follow, and make sure that you are doing the right thing by your kids, whether you're a coach or a parent. It's really, in a lot of ways, it's the same thing. I mean, you talk about all the time how much you love your players and you love the boys on your team, and that is it's a parental instinct that I think we have that we're trying to incorporate more and more all the time into how we run our teams. So I see everything works hand in hand there, whether you're talking about specifically your own kids or it's just your kids.
Yeah, exactly.
As much as we need to keep learning and we need to keep expanding out our knowledge base and being open to new ideas, certain things will always remain true. From my perspective, I want everybody to give 100% effort and have a positive mental attitude, PMA at all times, so great things will happen. Final thoughts, Coach?
Yeah, one of the things that I really like about the conversation with Travis was, from everything that he said, from a family point of view, will really, in my opinion, help people to understand that people really don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you on the next one.